Okay, let's get into it. The word burnout. I mean, you hear it everywhere, right? It's tossed around in meetings, all over social media. You probably say it to your friends. But what are we really talking about when we say we're burned out? Well, today we're going to deconstruct that exact term, look at the science, and figure out why it feels like such a modern epidemic, especially for the new generation hitting the workforce.
So let's start with a number that just, wow, it really makes you stop and think. A recent Cigna Health survey found that a staggering 98% of Gen Z say they've experienced symptoms of burnout. Just let that sink in. We're not talking about a small group here. That's almost the entire generation that's just starting their careers.
And it doesn't stop there. Get this, a Deloitte survey found that 46% of Gen Z feel stressed or anxious all or even most of the time. You know, these aren't just one-off bad days. These numbers are pointing to a really serious and super widespread mental health challenge. So when you see stats like that, it's pretty clear why we're starting here. We're not just looking at some passing trend. No, a lot of people are calling this a modern epidemic. You see, the really interesting thing is how this has shifted. This isn't just about feeling a little tired after a long week anymore. For a whole generation, it's becoming a defining shared experience. They're walking into a professional world that has a whole new set of pressures their parents just never had to deal with. To really get what's going on, we have to peel back the layers and get past how we casually use the word. So let's dig into what researchers and doctors actually mean when they talk about burnout. So let's just ask the question head on. If we strip away all the buzz, what is the official clinical definition of burnout? And here you have it. This is the definition that's come out of decades of research. And the most important part here is that burnout isn't just any kind of stress. It's a very specific three-part syndrome that comes from chronic, meaning long-term, never-ending, stress related to your job. And this breaks down those three dimensions perfectly. So first up, you've got exhaustion, the feeling of being totally, completely drained, like your battery's at zero. Then comes cynicism, which is when you start to feel detached, even negative about the work you do. And the final piece is a lack of efficacy. That's when you feel like you're just not good at your job anymore and you lose all that self-confidence. It's the mix of all three that is true burnout. All right, now this is where our deep dive gets really fascinating. For years, scientists have been debating the blurry line between burnout and another huge condition, depression. Which leads us to this really provocative question that came up in a big 2015 academic review. Are we just using the word burnout because it sounds a little more socially acceptable than saying, my job is making me depressed? So, traditionally, this is how we've tried to separate the two. Burnout was seen as something that happened at work. You could feel totally burned out from your job, but still go home and enjoy your hobbies. Depression, on the other hand, was seen as something that affects everything in your life, with that key symptom of anhedonia. You know, losing pleasure in things you used to love. But here's the kicker. That same academic review found that if you look at people with severe burnout, up to 90% of them also meet the criteria for a depression diagnosis. So that neat, clean line we just drew between the two, suddenly it gets really, really blurry.
And the researchers themselves put it perfectly with this powerful statement. The whole idea that burnout and depression are these two totally separate things is, as they say, conceptually fragile. It really suggests that at the very least, these two things are deeply connected.
So now that we have a better handle on what burnout is and how closely it's tied to depression, let's get into the why. What is it about our modern world that's fueling this crisis? Well, it really seems to be a perfect storm of factors. You've got the always-on culture from remote work, the rise of what some are calling comparison burnout from social media, huge financial pressures, and of course the classics, terrible work-life balance and just crushing workloads. Let's just zero in on that first one for a second. For so many of us, the office is now the kitchen table or maybe the bedroom. And that has just totally dissolved the boundaries between our work lives and our personal lives, making it almost impossible to truly switch off. And yeah, the data absolutely backs this up. Research shows that people who work from home tend to work, on average, about 3 hours more per day than people in the office. That inability to log off really adds up day after day. And then there's this pressure that's so unique to our time. We are constantly swimming in the curated highlight reels of everyone else's lives, the big promotions, the perfect vacations, you name it. And that constant comparison can create this gnawing feeling of inadequacy, this feeling that you're falling behind. Some therapists are even calling it comparison burnout. So with this really complex mix of psychological, social, and workplace issues, what can we actually do about it? Let's talk solutions, both for us as individuals and for the companies we work for. Well, the good news is there are real, actionable steps on both sides. For employees, a lot of it is about reclaiming some control. Setting hard boundaries, like having offline hours. But honestly, the bigger responsibility really has to fall on the employers. This isn't just about offering a yoga class, it's about real systemic change, like offering flexible schedules, providing truly accessible mental health support, and making sure that leaders are actually modeling a healthy work-life balance themselves.
And that's the bottom line here. You can't just meditate your way out of a systemic problem. Individual coping skills are important, for sure, but they're only half the story. Real, lasting change happens when organizations tackle the root causes of burnout in their own culture.
Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is this feeling of exhaustion and cynicism just the price we have to pay for being ambitious in the 21st century? Or is it a fundamental challenge to the way we've built the world of work? A challenge that we have the power and maybe even the responsibility to solve together?